Nanmen is a small village near Jincheng in China. It's a primitive, peaceful place where the simple villagers work to live without any notable ambitions for the future. They eat what they harvest from their fields and sell the surplus to meet other needs such as clothing and other necessities. The villagers live like a beehive, working during the day and returning home in the evening to rest. Because of this, most of them don't know their neighbors well. They don't have much time to meet or socialize with them. When someone goes missing or is killed, it doesn't cause much concern, especially if the person isn't a family member. Poverty and relentless work have made them indifferent to their surroundings. Even the local police are in a deep slumber, mirroring the villagers' apathy. Reports of incidents are sometimes filed by families, but they rarely follow up because they lack the time. Consequently, police reports pile up and gather dust as the lazy police force is accustomed to a dull routine. Administrative and financial corruption also play a role, as these remote areas are far from the eyes of the central government in Beijing. As the saying goes, when the cat's away, the mice will play. This quiet, monotonous life where everyone is self-focused provided the perfect environment for our story's criminal, Zhang Yongming, who was born in 1956 and grew up in these parts. In his youth, Zhang was known for being highly emotional, violent, and impulsive. One day, he got into a fight with his cousin, and the only weapon at hand was a rusty knife nearby. He grabbed it and tried to kill his cousin, but divine intervention saved his cousin at the last moment when Chang's father and uncle intervened, resulting in Chang being thrown out of the house. With newfound freedom, Chang's criminal tendencies took over. He became like a human predator, roaming the area to kill and dismember his victims in front of passers-by, without anyone daring to stop him because he knew the area well. However, in 1979, Chang was caught red-handed when someone finally had the courage to report him. He was found with the dismembered body of a teenager, preparing to move it from the scene of the crime. The police, initially reluctant to act to avoid drawing attention to the area's corruption, and arrested him. Chang was sentenced to death, but not long after the village forgot, or rather, pretended to forget, what had happened. The evidence in his case was altered, changing his death sentence to life imprisonment. In 1997, the villagers were shocked when Chang was released and given a piece of land and some money to help him become a law-abiding citizen and reintegrate into society. Chang bought a secluded house in the village and started farming. He kept to himself, moving between his field and his home, rarely speaking to anyone. Occasionally, he would sell some dried meat at the local grocery store, telling customers it was ostrich meat. The poor villagers, who had never left and didn't know what ostrich meat was, bought it because it was affordable and they were happy to have a steady supply. Only Chang knew the true source of the meat. During that period, significant changes were occurring in China, transforming it from a sluggish and lazy country into an industrial and financial giant on the global stage. Among these changes was the construction of many schools and universities, some of which were built near the small village where Zhang lived. Students from far and wide came to enroll in these universities, and the villagers sent their children to the new schools. With the increase in schools and students, reports of missing students started to surface from time to time. All the missing individuals were teenagers and young adults, aged between 16 and 22. However, the police, wanting to avoid drawing attention to the village, made excuses and justified the disappearances as cases of running away from poverty and hardship. They even threatened the victims' families to keep them quiet, effectively silencing them. One day in 2011, a teenage boy was passing by Zhang Yongming's house when Zhang suddenly attacked him from behind, attempting to strangle him with a leather belt. Zhang tightened the belt with both hands, but the boy's screams during the farmer's break caused them to rush over. They saw Zhang trying to drag the boy towards his house by force. Seeing the villagers gather around, Zhang laughed, claiming he was joking, and let the boy go. The villagers immediately reported the incident to the police, and Zhang was arrested. However, he was released within hours. The police officer said he was just joking with the boy, but you villagers were too quick to judge. The villagers had nothing to say and returned to their homes. A month after this incident, the same boy who had been strangled disappeared without a trace, and no one knew what had happened to him. The series of disappearances continued, and ostrich meat flooded the market. The poor villagers lived in the hope that their children would return, while the police enjoyed the false sense of security that covered the sky of that cursed village. On April 25, 2012, a 19-year-old Han Yao, a business administration student at Yunnan University, which is near this ominous village, went missing. There were witnesses to his disappearance. He had spent the previous night with friends and bid them farewell at a crossroads, planning to meet them again the next day. However, the young man vanished from the village without a trace, as if the earth had swallowed him up. The police's justification that he had run away to escape poverty, possibly drugging his family in the process, was unconvincing. His family was well off. He was an excellent student, and he had said goodbye to his friends, intending to see them the next day. Unlike other families, his family was undeterred by police threats and began an extensive search and drawing media attention. 15 days after his disappearance, local newspapers reported that the police had done nothing to help the family in their search. These reports hit the village hard, especially for those whose children had been missing for years and who had suffered in silence. They too turned to the media to share the stories of their missing children. There were heartbreaking and almost unbelievable stories. One such story involved a 12-year-old boy who was helping his parents harvest crops. During lunch, he returned home with his grandmother and was walking ahead of her in the cornfield when he suddenly disappeared without a trace. His distraught parents believed some form of magic had made their son vanish before their eyes. Another story was about a child who disappeared suddenly while in the field with his father and grandfather. They initially thought he had gone to the restroom, but he never returned. There were numerous other stories. A child coming home from school, another walking down the street, and many more. These tales provided sensational material for the press and created a public uproar in Beijing, shaking the local police force. In response, the Ministry of Public Security in Beijing sent an investigation team. Upon arriving in Nanmen, they found the local residents in a state of panic. People came forward to share stories of their missing children, recalling incidents from the past, leading back to the history of Zhang. The investigation team was astonished that these disappearances had remained hidden for so long despite occurring over many years. A thorough and secret investigation was launched, with some information released to the press on May 23, 2012. It was announced that the police chief of Jincheng, along with the police captain and 12 officers, had been dismissed for failing to investigate the numerous missing person reports. For 2 weeks, Beijing investigators combed the area, and the villagers were shocked when Zhang Yongming's house was cordoned off with yellow tape to prevent anyone from passing by. For several days, investigators entered and exited the house carrying numerous uncountable bags. The villagers grew increasingly fearful that these bags were connected to their missing loved ones, with rumors spreading that bones were seen inside them. The press began picking up on the story, reporting that Chinese police suspected the killer to be a cannibal who had consumed and sold the flesh of about 20 missing people. They described discovering a gruesome scene in his home in Yunnan Province. The reports became more specific, stating that a 56-year-old man named Zhang Yongming had been arrested and accused of the disappearance of at least 7 recently missing individuals. Police found jars containing human eyeballs preserved in alcohol and salted meat strips hanging around the house, believed to be human. They also found piles of human bones, suggesting he had been feeding his dogs with human remains. Media sources reported that 20 young people had disappeared within a few kilometers of the suspect's home, and documents belonging to Hanyu were found in Zhang's house. The revelations by the Chinese police shocked the nation. These disappearances were not ordinary kidnappings, but were the work of a terrifying serial killer and cannibal. During this time, the Chinese government tried to cover up the case to avoid alarming the local population and tarnishing the area's reputation among tourists and university students. The day after the newspapers published the news about the killer, the Chinese government immediately ordered the removal of all related reports and information from the internet. However, 4 days later, due to the public uproar, China broke its silence, and the official Chinese news agency Xinhua released the following information. A team of investigators from Beijing took over the investigation into the disappearance of teenagers in Yunnan. The suspect, Zhang Yongming from Nanmen village, was arrested, and a large amount of physical evidence was found in his home. DNA comparisons linked him to the murder of 11 victims. The suspect used various methods to conceal his crimes, including dismembering, burying, and burning the remains to destroy evidence. Cannibalism is a sensitive topic in China, with historical customs and beliefs about it. In times of famine, their ancestors resorted to cannibalism, but it is now a taboo subject. This case was closely monitored before being released to the media. Zhang Yongming was like a mute. He neither spoke nor confessed to anything. However, all the evidence, clues, and his dark past testified against him. As mentioned before, he had a history of killing and dissecting humans back in 1979. It seems he changed his methods, becoming more secretive and careful about hiding traces of his crimes. Criminals don't change much over the years. Like a wolf, he preyed on his victims who were unlucky enough to pass near his home. He would strangle them with a belt until they suffocated, drag them into his house, dismember them, and separate the flesh from the bones. He would collect their eyes in jars filled with alcohol, place the bones in bags and bury them in his backyard, eat some of the flesh and feed the rest to his 3 dogs. He would salt and hang the remaining meat to dry like fish, then sell it in the local market, calling it ostrich meat. He might have burned some inedible parts along with the victim's belongings. The Chinese authorities refused to disclose where the meat was sold to avoid causing more panic among the population. On July 28, 2012, the trial of the serial killer began. Zhang refused to admit his crimes, apologize to the victims' families, or show any remorse. His lawyer claimed he suffered from mental disorders, but the court found him sane and sentenced him to death. He was convicted of killing 11 of his victims, proven through DNA evidence. The police and the court did not respond to questions regarding the motives for the killings. On January 10, 2013, the Chinese serial killer was executed. He was taken to the location where he had committed his crimes and was executed there. Rumors spread among the local residents that he believed in the ancient traditions of their ancestors, thinking that consuming the flesh of young people would renew his youth, as all his victims were teenagers. This human predator was executed after many years of preying on others, but the village remains in shock to this day.